Parshas Shoftim is always the first Parsha of the month of Elul, and I'm back in Houston, Texas, and I'm speaking to you from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. It's great to be back here, back home, back in the great state of Texas, in the Torch Center, in the glorious Torch Center, and it's the month of Elul. We are less than a month away from Rosh Hashanah, from the Day of Judgment, and of course, throughout the Jewish world, each morning we hear the shofar. And after davening this morning, I asked the gentleman who was blowing the shofar, I said, would you mind doing it again? Because I got to play it for the podcast. And he said, absolutely. And even though the place was like people were filing out of shul, so it was a little bit weird because we already just blew the shofar, I pulled out my phone and I recorded it for your listening pleasure. Here we go, the shofar from this morning in Houston, Texas. Of course, we know that this is a custom that's ancient. Throughout this month, we listen to the shofar, we hear the shofar, and the goal of the shofar is not just to hear the hallowed sounds, but to use it as an opportunity to wake up from our spiritual slumber. We may be asleep at the wheel. It's time to rouse ourselves and get ready for the wonderful days upcoming, for the awesome days upcoming. And what better way to get ready than to study the Parsha together on the Parsha podcast for Parshas Shoftim. So let's begin. It's a very interesting Parsha. And when you read it, there's so many different laws. We're transitioning into the part of Devarim where there's lots and lots and lots of laws. And that will continue, of course, next week. He says more mitzvahs than any other Parsha. But you read the laws, and not many of the laws are pertinent to us today. It starts off with judges. You have to establish courts and judges in cities and tribes. And we learn about how the judges have to operate. They have to pursue justice, tzedek tirdof, to not take bribes. This law is actually not pertinent to us today because this refers specifically to judges who have smicha, who have ordination, which has been a defunct institution, unfortunately, for more than 1,000 years. We don't have Torah sovereignty in the land. This, we hope, will be relevant very soon. And then it talks about the temple grounds. You cannot plant trees, or certainly not an Asherah tree, an idolatrous tree, on Temple Mount. You cannot have monuments. That's the ways of the idolaters in their temples. Of course, not relevant to us today. We hope it will become relevant really soon. Laws of sacrifices. You cannot bring sacrifices from blemished animals. What does the Jewish court do with an idolater? Well, that's a capital offense. We learn more of the laws of the jurisprudence in our religion. What do we do when there is judicial uncertainty? Well, that's the role, that's the jurisdiction of the Sanhedrin. When Sanhedrin rules, bein dam ledam, between blood and blood, between din ledin, this law versus that law, there is an imperative to adhere to their rulings. A rogue judge who flouts the ruling of the Sanhedrin, that's actually a capital offense as well. We have the law of assigning a king and the limitations foisted upon that institution. He can have too many horses, too many wives, too much money. He must have 2 Torah scrolls, one with him at all times as an amulet hanging from his arm. He should always remember that he himself is a subject of God. We learn about the laws, what the Levite gets, what the Kohen gets, all sorts of laws that are related to idolatry, the laws of divination, prohibited, necromancy, prohibited, seances, sorcery, clairvoyant, fortune tellers. We must be wholesome. Tamim tihiyah, be wholesome with Hashem your God. Don't seek out the experts, the gurus. Don't try to take the path of a spiritual shortcut. That path is tinged with idolatry. We read about the concept of prophets to come after Moshe, how to vet the prophets, what are the responsibilities to adhere to the prophet, how do we know the prophet's telling the truth, and when must we follow the prophet when he tells us to go against the Torah. It's only if it's in a law not related to idolatry, and if it is a one-time exception, like Elijah on Mount Carmel. We learn about the cities of refuge for a third time, and the imperative to add 3 more cities in messianic times. These are the cities where an accidental murderer must flee to. We read a law that is actually still pertinent today. The prohibition against encroaching on someone else's property. If there is a border separating me and my neighbor, and I could stealthily move the border in the middle of the night, that would be a violation of hasagas gvul, encroaching on someone else's property. We have the law of the false witness. If there are false witnesses and they are caught, they receive the precise punishment that they wanted to inflict upon the defendant. And then chapter 20, we read about war. When you go to war against your enemies. And there is a Rashi comment that I noticed this year that may, in fact, be quite relevant. Rashi asks the question, why does the verse say, when you go to war against your enemy, why does it stress that the opponent, that the antagonist, that the adversary in the war is your enemy? Rashi understands this as a commandment. When you go to war, you must believe that they are your enemies. You have to treat them like enemies. Now, I'll read you what it says. This does not sound like warfare today. Al tirachem aleim. Do not have mercy upon them. They're your enemies. Don't have mercy upon them. Ki lo yirachamu alecha, because they will not have mercy upon you. Maybe this is relevant today. We learn about the unusual method of conscription for war. If you built a house, but you haven't moved in. If you planted a vineyard, but you have not inaugurated it. If you have betrothed, but not married a woman. Or if you're fearful, well, then you can go home. Everyone else may stay and fight. We read about the war conduct. First, you must offer peace overtures before launching an attack. If they refuse, you must perhaps launch an attack, but in war you cannot destroy fruit-bearing trees to make siege works. This law actually applies in peacetime as well. We are prohibited to waste. If there's a tree, it's providing fruits. You cannot destroy it. And then there's the final law of the Parsha. What happens when you discover a corpse outside the city? We don't know the circumstances of this unfortunate passing, of this unfortunate chap. The nearest city, we measure, must make an elaborate ceremony to wash their hands of the guilt of not tending to this poor person. They take a calf and they kill it in a very dramatic fashion in front of the entire city, in front of all of the townspeople, to impress upon the people the severity of murder and to hopefully solicit any information that may lead to the capture of the murderer. Our nation does not accept low levels of crime. For us, murder is completely and utterly intolerant. Oh, the city of East St. Louis, which I drove by this week. I Googled it. Is it safe? And Google says, if you're on the interstate, it's probably fine, but don't stay there. Even Google said that to me. Oh, but there was a 35% reduction in crime. There's only a few hundred murders. No, that's not tolerable. In our religion, if there's even one murder, the entire nation has to stop, because this is not at all tolerable. That's the last law. That's the Egla Rufa. The absolute overwhelming majority of the content of our parsha is not relevant to us. Things that are pertinent to temple times, when we have kings, when we have judges, when we have prophets, when we have a Sanhedrin. But I want to focus on a part of the Parsha, something that we hope will be very soon pertinent, and that is the laws of a king. Would you know that Messiah, that we are hoping for his arrival, he is known as HaMelech HaMashiach, the King Messiah. But we like democracy, right? Hey, speak for yourself. Democracy, Winston Churchill says, is the worst form of government, of course, except for all other forms. But we like a benevolent dictatorship. That's more like it. So a king seems to have unbridled power, but in our parsha we read the laws of a king, chapter 17, verses 14 through 20, and all the laws about what he mustn't do, and how he must not allow his power to corrupt him. Ki savo la'aretz, when you come to the land, and you declare after you settle it, Asim al Melech, I want to have a king. I want to be like all the other nations. Well, then you should place upon yourself a king. You should appoint a king. Someone who God chooses, meaning that the prophet is the one to anoint the king. He must be from your brother. Don't select an outsider. Rak lo yarbelo susim. He should not have too many horses. And he should not bring the nation back to Egypt in order to have more horses. And God said not to return to Egypt. He's allowed to have enough horses for his chariot, but no more. And he can have too many wives, because they may lead his heart astray. A maximum of 18. That should be enough, you would imagine. And he should not have too much gold and silver, enough to pay for his army, but not too much. Restriction upon restriction placed upon the king. Theoretically, from a biblical perspective, if you could persuade, 20, 30, 40 women to marry you, it may not be advisable, but it would be permitted. A king, he may not have unlimited wives. They may lead his heart astray. Okay. Cannot have too much money or too many horses. Continues the verse, and then when he settles on his throne, he must write a second copy of the Torah. He must have 2 Torah scrolls, one that's with him at all times, that enters, that exits with him, and one that remains in his palace. V'haisa imo, this Torah scroll should be with him at all times. V'karabo, he should read the Torah all the days of his life. What does a teen do? He reads the Torah to realize that he is subject to God. No one is above the law. So he learns to fear God and to observe the whole Torah and all the statutes, and so that his heart does not ascend above his brethren, and it does not deviate or depart from the mitzvahs, not right, not left, so that he should live long upon his throne, upon his kingdom, hu uvanav, him and his sons, b'kerev Yisrael, amongst Israel. Even a small mitzvah, even a mitzvah that is of rabbinic origin, he cannot deviate, not right, not left. And if he does this, he's a righteous king. He will live long and rule long. Long shall he reign. But if he doesn't, it's implied that he will not have a long monarchy. There are all sorts of interesting laws here applied to a king. A king, the definition is that he has all the power. And the Torah is diminishing his otherwise unlimited, unbridled power. He may not have too many horses, wives, money. He must have multiple Torah scrolls so that he always remembers God and learns the Torah, and that he does not lord over his brethren. So before we dig into the essence of what I want to talk about, a few quick observations. If you read verse 16 of chapter 17, it talks about the horses. Lo yarbel lo susim, he should not have too many horses. And he should not bring the nation back to Egypt. And why would he do that? Leman harbos sus, to increase horses. But there's a change. It goes from susim, which is horses, to sus, which is horse. Why does it switch from plural to singular? So it's a very powerful insight. I actually saw it quoted from a few different sources. In the name of the Chafetz Chaim, there's a certain insidious evolution of sinfulness. The king really wants the horses. The horses add to his prestige, adds to his war-making ability, and he wants more horses. But the place where all the horses are, the center of the industry, is in Egypt. And he may have a desire to anyhow go to Egypt. And it starts off, he should not have lots of horses. And then it says, don't go down to Egypt to add even one horse. The way people fall into the trap, are ensnared by the Yetzer Hara, is that he starts off by dangling a very large reward, lots of horses. But once someone is trapped in the web of sin that was placed before them, then they'll even violate, so to speak, the law, even for a measly single horse. interesting observation, but let's continue. Verse 19. A king has to have a Torah scroll, really two, but one that he takes with him wherever he goes. V'karabo, and he should read it, kol yemei chayav, all the days of his life. The Talmud has a very sharp observation. A king is busy morning to night, dealing with matters of state. The king is maybe the busiest person in the whole kingdom. He has the responsibility for the entire land upon his shoulders. And Moshe was like a king, but he studied Torah. And Joshua was like a king. And what does it say about Joshua? V'yidis about Yom Ovalai, you should study Torah day and night. A king is expected to study Torah all the time. Kol yimei chayav, all days of his life. Days and nights. Says the Talmud. If a king who's completely swamped with work, the Torah tells us he should study Torah day and night. He should read from the Torah scroll all the days of his life. Us ordinary lay people, all the more. So very nice, sharp observation from the Talmud. But I want to focus on the last verse of this section about the king. Chapter 17, verse 20. A king is not accountable to any one of his brethren. He's the top of the pyramid. And the Torah tells us he's still accountable. He's accountable to God. He must subject himself to God. And he must have a Torah scroll, 2 Torah scrolls. And he must read it all the time. Why? Libilti rum levavo, so his heart does not ascend over his brethren. He does not act haughtily, with arrogance, with hubris. He does not feel a sense of supremacy over his brethren, over his subjects, over his constituents. The king must not be haughty. And the Ramban, in his commentary to this verse, is a very sharp comment. He says in this verse, chapter 17, verse 20 of the book of Devarim, our Parsha, Parshas Shoftim. Here the Torah is hinting on the prohibition against geus, pride, arrogance, haughtiness, hubris. Obviously, the opposite of that is humility. Now, we know, we've seen it many times already. The greats, they personify humility. All the way back in the book of Genesis, Abraham, chapter 18, verse 27, Abraham tells God, Anochi afar va'efer, I am but dust and ashes. If Abraham said that, if the Torah records that Abraham said it, he believed it. What a level of humility. I'm dust and ashes. I'm nothing. That's how Abraham described himself. Moshe and Aaron, book of Exodus, Vanachnu ma, we are what? We're nothing. Moshe himself, in the book of Numbers, Veha'ish Moshe, the man Moshe, Anav me'od, exceedingly humble, Mikol Adam, more humble than any other person. Asher al pnei adama, he was the humblest of them all. Not in the Torah. David, king of Israel, Vanochi tola'as velo ish, I am a worm, not a man. These are all recorded in Scripture. These are the perspectives of these giants, Abraham, Moshe, Aaron, David. They exemplified humility. And here the Ramban is telling us, this is a hint at the instruction, at the commandment to refrain from haughtiness, to refrain from assuming supremacy. Now the Ramban continues and explains, this is not only for a king, this is for everyone. The Torah is hinting about the concept of humility. And the imperative to not be haughty, it's hinting to it by the king, because a king, well, he has reason to be haughty. He is, as we mentioned, the top of the pyramid. And if the king is prohibited to be arrogant, prohibited to be haughty, prohibited to have elevation of his heart above his brethren, well, certainly everyone else who is lower down on the food chain, they mustn't be haughty. If the king, who is worthy of being exalted and glorified above others, if he is warned to be humble and lowly in his heart, certainly his brethren who are lay people, they must be humble. If even the king must refrain from assuming supremacy over his brothers, and the king has grounds to assume supremacy, well then certainly ordinary people who don't have those same grounds to assume supremacy over others, they must not be haughty. And the Ramban continues, arrogance, hubris, conceit, ga'ava in Hebrew, this is a revolting and shameful quality, afilu b'melech, even for a king. Why? Ki laHashem levado, to God alone, hagadula v'haromamus, is the greatness and the exaltedness. Velo levado hatihila, and to God alone is worthy of praise. And tov as Hashem kod valev, he cites the verse in Proverbs, it's an abomination of God, anyone who is hubristic, who is arrogant, who is haughty in his heart. Very interesting, powerful comment here in the Ramban, chapter 17, verse 20. And I think there's really two main points. The first thing it says that this is the place in the Torah where we are commanded to not be arrogant, to not be hubristic, to not have conceit, to not have pride. Now, he doesn't say we're commanded, we're hinted at the command. This is actually an interesting meta point. We know, we're trained, we're taught that a major part of what the Almighty wants of us is to improve ourselves, is character refinement, ethical improvement. But there really aren't direct commandments in the Torah to have good character, to have resplendent character. And even over here, the Ramban says this is where it's hinted to. It's not explicit. It's hinted to. And the commentaries explain the reason why the Torah does not list all the wonderful character traits and say, be kind, be benevolent, be patient, be slow to anger, and so on. Be merciful. Be humble. Because all that is a precondition to Torah. To make yourself a worthy receptacle of Torah, you must have all those characteristics. And therefore, Torah comes after that. Derech Eretz, to live in an elevated way, that precedes Torah. But this is the first idea the Ramban says. Very interesting. This is the source, or at least this is the hint to the source in the Torah, where the Torah warns us against being haughty. But the point I want to focus on is the Ramban's second point. The Ramban says, well, why are we told this specifically by a king? There are many places where the Torah could have said, don't be haughty, or hinted to, don't be haughty. Be humble. Don't lord over your brethren. Everyone must be humble and not be haughty. So why are we told this, or hinted to this idea, specifically by a king? So the Ramban explains, because a king, well, he has the most credible claim to be haughty, to be supreme. And if even a king mustn't have conceit, mustn't have hubris, mustn't be arrogant or haughty, well, then certainly everyone else who does not have as strong of a claim of supremacy, they must not be haughty. Everyone must be humble. Only God is deserving of praise, of exaltedness. And the best place to be told that is regarding a king, and from that we can extrapolate to everyone else. Rambam, so this is confusing. There's Ramban, Nachmanides, and there's Rambam, which is Maimonides. Maimonides has in his great work, of law, he has a section called the Laws of Kings. And it's very interesting where he describes the proper conduct of a king. This is chapter 2 of the Laws of Kings. And he starts off by saying, a king is honored in a great way. And there's an awe and a dread and a fear of the king in the heart of every man. And you're not allowed to ride on his horse, and you can't sit in his throne, and you can't use his scepter, and you cannot use his crown, and you cannot use any of his implements. And all of these things are designated to this king, and when he dies, they are destroyed. The king has to have this aura to him. And even his servants and the people of his household, only another king can employ them. And if he dies, no one can marry his wife. And it's prohibited for anyone to see him when he's naked, or he's getting a haircut, or when he's in the bathhouse, or even when he's drying himself up. Why? Because it's not befitting of the honor, of the prestige, of the aura, of the grandiose aura of a king. And suppose a king wants to be humble and say, I forgive it, I forgo my honor. Melech shemachal al kvodo. A king says, I'm forgoing my honor. Don't give me any honor. Treat me like a layperson. Ein kvodo machal. His honor is not forgiven. He's not allowed to do it. And he has to get a haircut every day because it's to always look beautiful. And he has to have the most beautiful and prestigious and glorious garments. And he has to sit on his throne in his palace. And he has to place the crown upon his head. And whenever he wants to summon any person, he could summon them to his chambers. And they have to stand in front of him and bow to the ground. And even a prophet of God, must stand and bow before a king. Well, what about a high priest? High priest, well, that's the foremost spiritual leader of the people. So the high priest, he's not obligated to come when the king summons him. And he is not obligated to stand in front of the king at attention. And in fact, the opposite is true. The king is supposed to stand in front of the high priest. Nevertheless, even the high priest must accord honor to the king and to stand in front of him. And the king should only stand when he meets the high priest for the purposes of finding out the will of Hashem with the Urim and the Tumim that the high priest has in his breastplate. And the king is also encouraged to accord honor to the Torah scholars. And when he meets the Sanhedrin, of course, the Supreme Court, well, he should stand and he should make them sit down next to him. But all this, where he accords honor to others, it's only in private. In public, when the subjects see the king, he doesn't do anything of submission. He must maintain his prestige. And he doesn't stand up for anyone. And he doesn't speak softly. He speaks tough. And he calls people by their name, not with an honorific or a title. Why? Because there's an imperative, there's a law. Tehei maso alecha. You have to have the dread and the fear and the seriousness of the king. The trepidation of the king. And then the Rambam continues. The king himself, though, he has to have humility. After this long list of ways the king's honor must be manifested, to the degree that his honor must be manifested, he himself must exhibit humility. In his heart, he must be lowly and humble. And the Rambam cites David, who says, "My heart is empty; it's void inside of me." And he should not act with too much pride in front of his brethren. And he should be benevolent and kind to small people, to big people. And he should take upon himself their missions, and he should be careful about their honor. And when he speaks to the masses, he should speak to them gently. La'olam yisnahed be'anava yasera. He must forever, always, act with extra humility. And there's no greater king than Moshe. And what did Moshe say? V'anachnu ma? What are we? We're nothing. And the king should suffer, should bear the brunt of their idiosyncrasies, and treat them like a mother treats her suckling youth. Treat them like a shepherd who's tending to their flock. This is the chapter 2 of the Laws of Kings. It's a very interesting chapter. It's a long list of ways that the king must exhibit pride and supremacy and honor and demand the honor and not forego it. He has to be assertive and dominant and strong and resolute and unyielding and unbending, but also has to be extra humble, more humble than anyone else, in a way resembling that of Moshe. And the commentaries tell us there's a very interesting verse regarding the coronation of Solomon in the book of Kings, Kings 1, chapter 1, verse 33. David is speaking to his people and instructing them to take Solomon and to coronate him by the Gihon stream. And David tells them, take him on my mule and bring him to the Gihon stream. And there, Tzadok, the high priest, and Nathan, the prophet, should coronate him, should anoint him to be Melech al Yisrael, to be king over Israel. And you should blow the shofar, and you should pronounce Yehi HaMelech Shlomo. May King Shlomo, King Solomon, live long. And the commentators observe David is giving the instructions for the coronation of Solomon, and he says, oh, take him down there on my mule, which is so strange. Why the mule? And the commentaries tell us, because a mule is a hybrid, is a chimera, a mashup of a donkey and a horse. And a horse, that symbolizes pride. The verse tells us that Ki ga'o ga'a, this is in the Song of the Songs, sus v'rachvo ramavayam. The Ramban there explains that the horse is the embodiment, is the animal that embodies pride, honor, prestige. By contrast, the lowliest of the animals is the donkey. Abraham, Moshe, Messiah will ride on the donkey. And that is a description of their humility. A king has to ride a mule. He has to have partially this incredible honor that he's not willing to forego. And at the same time, and that's like the honor, so to speak, the prestige of the horse, but he also has to have the humility, the overwhelming humility of the donkey. It seems to me that there's a bit of a difference in how Ramban and Rambam would answer the question of why we're told about humility and why we should not be arrogant, why we're told this specifically by a king. According to the Rambam says that a king has to have extra humility, not ordinary humility. He has to have more humility than anyone else. And therefore, the reason why we're told about humility, and he should not lord over his brother, the reason we're told about that by a king is because the king has to have more humility than an average person. The Ramban says, well, everyone has to have humility, the same level of humility. For a king, well, if he's humble, then everyone else certainly must be humble. But the Ramban, Nachmanides, does not say that a king has to be more humble than the regular people. The Ram seems to say that a king has to have even more humility than others, to the degree that his honor must be augmented, his humility must be on that same commensurate level. There's a very interesting law that the Talmud tells us about the blessings during the Shemona Esrei, during the Amidah prayer. We know that we bow 4 times. Even in our prayer today, we bow 4 times, twice at the beginning and twice towards the end. Says the Talmud, Book of Brachos, page 34a and b. That's only by a layperson. But a high priest bows at every single blessing, once at the beginning and once at the end. And a king, he bows at the beginning of the prayer, and he remains bowed before God for the duration of the prayer. This sounds like the Rambam, who says that the more elevated a person is, the more honor a person receives, the more humility is demanded of them. And the king gets more honor than anyone else, and therefore he has to have more humility than anyone else. The Ramban, who seems to say that everyone has to have the same amount of humility, he would likely interpret this Talmud and say, well, a king's got to work harder to have the same amount of humility, and therefore he has to bow for much longer in order to achieve the same level of humility. But regardless, we ask the question, why are we hinted to about the imperative to have humility and the imperative to not be arrogant and haughty? Why are we told about that by a king? We have 2 answers. We have the Ramban and the Rambam. And today, in this Parsha podcast, I want to suggest maybe another answer. Another answer why we're told about the prohibition against arrogance, specifically by a king. Now, you've been warned. This may be a bit controversial. And you may say, well, it's the beginning of Elul. Don't be controversial. Don't pick fights. I'm sorry. I cannot hold back. I cannot control myself. Here's what I want to suggest. Humility is undoubtedly one of, if not the most wonderful of all the characteristics that a person can develop and earn. In the famous letter of the Ramban, the aforementioned Nachmanides, he's talking about character. And he says, humility is the greatest, most wonderful characteristic a person can have. Midas ha'anava, the attribute of humility. Shehi midah tova, it's a great midah, it's a great character. Mid kol midas, from all the good characteristics that there are. Now, of course, we know Abraham is associated with it, Moshe, Aaron, David, Rabbi Judah the Prince, the architect of the Mishnah. The Talmud says that he was an exemplar of humility. And when he died, it's almost as if humility ended because he was such a humble person. And if you want to read about how wonderful humility is, there's a whole chapter in Mesilas Yesharim, in Path of the Just, or Way of the Upright. By Ramchal, chapter 22, all about humility. Now, of course, the opposite of humility is arrogance. And we have citations galore about the evils of arrogance. Talmud tells us, if someone is arrogant, if someone is hubristic, it's as if God says, him and me cannot live in the same world. Hubris, arrogance, is just not compatible with faith. Talmud tells us, if someone is arrogant, gasos haruach ki'ilu oved avodah zarah, it's as if they are an idolater, and their prayers won't penetrate, and their Torah won't endure, and they'll lose their olam haba. They will not be resurrected. And Rabbeinu Yonah tells us that this is the root of all sin. That's a pretty bad thing. The root of all sin is arrogance. And that's why it's so imperative to be lowly, to be humble. Me'od havishval ruach. Chapter 4 of Pirkei Avos. A lot. You should be humble. So no one's going to question that in our religion. Humility is maybe the greatest of all characteristics, and maybe the worst of them all is arrogance. Yet, I want to suggest that there is a concern that humility can be misplaced and can be dangerous. More precisely, premature humility can be destructive. Humility, I want to suggest, it's a double-edged sword. And the reason why is because it's very close. It's almost adjacent to subsisting with unintended mediocrity. Of course, Abraham said, I am but dust and ashes. And Moshe and Aaron say, Vanachnu ma, we're nothing. What are we? And David said, I'm a worm and not a man. If I were to really believe this, again, this is in scripture. This is what they believe about themselves. There's no way that this was hyperbolic. But suppose I actually say, or any one of us, we say we're dust. I am but dust. I'm just dust and ashes. I am a worm and not a man. Well, not much would be expected of such a person. If you are a worm and not a man, there aren't a lot of lofty expectations from you. If you are like Moshe and Aaron, we're nothing, well, maybe nothing is expected of you. Maybe nothing can possibly come out of you. Maybe from the worm, the potential greatness that they can achieve is microscopic, is minuscule. If a person believes truly that they are enfeebled, they're pathetic, they're inept, they're incompetent, they're but dust and ashes. Dust that people tread upon without thinking. Ashes where they were burnt and there's nothing left. They're a worm. Even people that love animals, no one loves the worms. They cut the worms. My kids do this in the summer. I can't believe it. They cut the worms and they put them on the little hook and they cast it into the water. They go fishing and they come up with this floppy fish. And there's always that brave kid who just grabs it, no problem. No one loves the worms, no one. But if you actually believe that, you are at risk of leaving a lot of greatness on the table. You may be, by opting to really believe that you're a worm and you're nothing and you're dust and ashes, you're opting for mediocrity. And that, as bad as arrogance and hubris is, that's even worse. I had some very devilish plans. I wanted to record a podcast and title it The Lurking Dangers of Humility, or Why I Am Opposed to Humility, the Insidious Venom of Humility. Now, this all sounds sacrilege. We know. We have the sources. Humility is maybe the greatest of all the characteristics. But there's a very big risk when it's done too early. And I saw some amazing statements from Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And he is someone who we can rely upon. I saw this in my grandfather's work, Alei Shur, Volume 2, page 188. And he cites Rabbi Salanter, you're starting to study Torah. And we know, mitoch shalolishma balishma, when you start off, you don't start off seeking perfection. You start off seeking imperfection. And through that, you could maybe go on a path to eventually arrive at lishma, at perfection. What is this path that you start off as? What's this path of imperfection when you start to study Torah? You know what he says? You start off by saying, I'm just the best. I'm superior to others who are not studying the Ma'is Torah. I'm the choicest of men. I'm better. I am more supreme than others who are not studying Torah. I am a prince. Now, sometimes definitions get a bit muddled, but a prince and a worm are very different things. When you start your path, you have to start it off shalolishma. You have to take the imperfect path, the path of ulterior motives, of imprecise motivations, and only through that can you arrive at perfection. Humility is a very advanced attribute. You start off by saying, no humility here. I'm the best because I get something in my Torah and I have a lot of potential and I could do the whole thing. And I have the brains and the ability and the power and the money endowed me with all these tremendous gifts. I'm not a worm. I'm a titan. I'm not dust and ashes. I'm a behemoth, 800-pound gorilla. I could do it. I got the goods. Rabbi Salanter is also purported to have said, I have the mind of 1,000 men. And then he added, of course, and therefore God expects me to produce the work of 1,000 men. What I want to suggest today is humility, when done prematurely, can be dangerous and counterproductive. And maybe that's why the prohibition against haughtiness is told us by a king. Why specifically by the king? So we have the Ramban's answer, the Rambam's answer. Maybe there's a different idea. Only someone who has reached the absolute pinnacle should start to think about humility. The king, well, that's the top of the pyramid, the undisputed peak of the food chain. There are no more promotions to be had. For him, we know for sure there's no risk of unintended mediocrity. There's no risk of saying, oh, I'm so small, I'm just a worm, I'm nothing, I'm dust and ashes, let me remain small. There's no risk of misplaced humility by the king. And therefore, he's the right person to teach us about humility. You're climbing the mountain, don't chop yourself down prematurely. Don't limit what you can achieve because you want to be humble. Reach your apex. And then it's time to be humble. Sages tell us that one of the reasons why Mount Sinai was selected, because it's not such a tall mountain. It's a pretty low mountain. And Torah, it's appropriately grasped by those who are humble. And Torah is like water. It runs down the mountain. It pools all the way at the bottom. And you want Torah to pool within you, you got to make yourself humble. And Moshe was the humblest of men, and therefore he's the one who's worthy of giving us the Torah. But here's the question. Why not give the Torah in a valley? That's even lower than a mountain. And I have the perfect spot. Near the Dead Sea, it's the lowest elevation in the whole world. It's in the land of Israel. How convenient. Give the Torah there. Maybe better yet, dig a big hole. Torah must be given on a mountain. Only if you realize that you are a mountain. You're elevated. You're close to God. You tower above your surroundings. Only then can you be a receptacle of Torah. But you climb the mountain, and you climbed it, and you're crowned a king. The next step, the next area of greatness, the capstone, that's going to be your humility. My friend Bill Cohn, BC, he always loves when I give diamond and jewelry-related analogies on the Parsha podcast. So here's some analogies. A diamond cutter. You have a rough diamond, and your job is to chip away at it, is to carve it, and to bring out its sparkle. But you first have to have a diamond. You have to have a nice, big, juicy diamond. And only then you polish it. Only then do you refine it. Only then do you make sure that it really pops. And yes, once the diamond's done, its splendor, its glory, its sheen, its beauty is in the cutting. Yes, the capstone of the greatness is the humility. But if you try to cut away before you even have the diamond, what do you have? The only thing that you may cut away is actually the tools that you need to get the diamond. You may ruin the tools that you need to get the diamond. Prematurely, you'll destroy your capacity to have something really beautiful. Humility, that is the greatest of all the attributes. That's the cutting, the shaping, the polishing of rough diamonds. Or maybe even another analogy. Humility is the capstone of the edifice that we are building. But humility is dangerously adjacent to unintended mediocrity, and that is deadly. That is totally intolerable. Who are the portraits of humility? Abraham, Anochi, Afar, Va'ephraim, dust and ashes. Vanachnu ma, Moshe and Aaron, we're nothing, we're nothing, we're nothing. And they believed it. I am a worm, not a man. Humility is a crown jewel. It's a crown jewel. Once you have a crown and it's already studded with jewels, then it's time to find the crown jewel to rule them all. That is humility. The king is the right person to teach us about humility and the dangers of arrogance. Let's get to this week's dilemma. It's a topical one. It's Elul season. And when they blow the shofar, there's two reactions. Some people say, oh no, it's Elul. Got to take life seriously. And some say, oh no, here we go again. I'm going to have to deal with these extra prayers and supplications for a month. We have to choose. Are we going to lean into Elul, try to take it seriously? Or maybe we could just burrow home, hibernate, wait it out. And this is an important dilemma, and an especially important one for those who have been around the block. We've had Eluls before we were inspired. But what happened? What did we earn from it? It fizzled out. Nothing tangible remained. The first thing we have to know is that Elul is an opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity. And it's an opportunity not to be wasted. And in our Parsha, we read that even a fruit tree, don't waste it. Don't make siege worts out of such a tree. If we cannot waste something physical, an unbelievable spiritual opportunity, well, certainly that must not be squandered. And what opportunity it is? It's Elul. HaMelech Basadeh. God, the king, is in the field. He's accessible. No appointment needed. I heard a wonderful analogy. Maybe it's like a helpful framework for how to think about Elul. There was a king who wanted the most exquisite of crowns. And he hired the best crown maker of them all. And he said, I'll give you all the gold and all the precious gems, everything you need to make the most beautiful popping of crowns. How long do you need? I need a year. I'll see you in a year. This jeweler was so excited. He goes home and tells his wife, we have it made. I'm going to make the most stunning crown for the king. And then when he goes to the G7 and he sees all the other kings, they're going to say, where's that crown? And they're going to hire me and we'll have it made. But it's a lot of work ahead. I just need a little bit of a vacation. I just need some time just to get ready for all that work. So they go on one of those vacations that's like around the world cruises. And they're traveling the whole world and they get back home and 8-9 months are gone. And they realize, oh no, it's the end of the year. We have only a few months left. We have to cram. We have to cram. And he goes to his workshop and he speaks to his colleagues. You simply don't have enough time. It's too much work. Even if you work 24 hours a day, you cannot finish in time. So one of his colleagues gives him a suggestion. Make a crown, but make it tiny. It's so small it can only fit on a finger. It's like a glorified ring. But make it just with all the embellishments, all the intricacies of the big crown. And use it to demonstrate to the king. This is what I made for you in only 1 month. Give me another year. In a year, I'll deliver you that crown. He goes to the king, gives him a small little box. The king's about to chop off his head, but he sees it. Oh, this is a little mini version of what you can make for me. Elul is a time for us to live our most elevated life. Our job is to bring glory to God, so to speak, as if to bring God a crown of glory. And we may have been derelict in our duties, neglecting our abilities, our potential, our tools, our gifts, We've been on a spiritual vacation. And you hear the shofar, it's there to wake us up. Time is ticking. And you know what? You may not be able to create the whole crown all at once in this month, but in 1 month, you can do a little mini version of it. And we come to God on Rosh Hashanah and we say, okay, this is a small little mini version of what I can become. And hopefully, over the next year, we make a full-blown version of that little mini micro beautiful crown of the month of El. It's an opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity. We are on the hook to make that crown. And now it's time for us to say, okay, well, let's do a little mini version of it that we can hopefully, over the coming year, make a full body version of it. It's a wonderful time of the year. It's a serious time of the year. A lot of people are overwhelmed by it. That's normal. But if the king is in the field and he's waiting for us, let's not lose this opportunity. Let's not waste this opportunity. I thank you for listening to this edition of the Parsha podcast from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful month of El. An uplifting, meaningful, productive, valuable, transformative month of Elul. We have extra prayers. We have, of course, the shofar each day. What a time. What a serious time. What an opportunity. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful month. It's now early enough, or it's late enough in the year that we can actually wish each other to have a cushy tova. May we all be inscribed and sealed in the book of life, in the book of great health and great happiness and great harmony and peace and prosperity and blessings for all of us, for our families, for our communities, for our people, for the whole world. And please God, we'll have a great Shabbos, fantastic Shabbos, and we'll get together with the help of the Almighty next week for another edition of the Parsha podcast. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.